At my daughter's 6th birthday party, my husband Caleb froze mid-sentence when he saw who walked through our backyard gate. The color drained from his face as Arnold Petrillo approached our picnic table, and I watched Caroline Lohan's champagne glass slip from her manicured fingers. "Surprise," I said calmly, cutting another slice of rainbow cake. I thought it was time we all got properly acquainted. The look of pure terror in Caleb's eyes told me everything I needed to know about how well this party was about to go. Let me tell you how we got here.
Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're a subscriber, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Tell us a duh.
3 months before that rainbow cake became the centerpiece of my carefully orchestrated revelation, I was living in the kind of marriage that looked perfect from the outside but felt hollow from within. Caleb Nyland and I had built what everyone called an ideal life in our suburban Denver neighborhood. Successful careers, a beautiful daughter named Bella, and a house that regularly appeared on our neighbors' Instagram feeds as #couplegoals. But perfection, I've learned, is often just a carefully maintained illusion. The signs started small, the way betrayal usually does. A different perfume clinging to his shirt collars when he came home from his late meetings at the architectural firm. Lipstick stains on his coffee cups that weren't my shade. I wore muted roses, not the bold crimson that kept appearing like accusatory fingerprints on his belongings. His phone, once casually left on kitchen counters and bedside tables, became a permanent appendage, clutched protectively against his chest even during our daughter's bedtime stories. The most telling change was in his eyes. Caleb had always been present, even when physically exhausted from work, but sometime around February, he developed a distant look, as if he was perpetually somewhere else, with someone else. When Bella would climb into his lap for their evening ritual of reading Charlotte's Web, I could see him going through the motions while his mind wandered to places I wasn't invited. I should have confronted him immediately. That's what the strong, independent woman I thought I was would have done. But reality is more complicated than our idealized versions of ourselves. Bella was thriving in 1st grade, finally making friends after a shy kindergarten year. The thought of destroying her stable world over my suspicions felt selfish, even though those suspicions grew stronger every day. Instead, I became a detective in my own home. I started paying attention to patterns: which nights he claimed to work late, which weekends he suddenly needed to visit job sites that never seemed to require follow-up discussions. I memorized the scents that didn't belong and documented the behavioral changes with the methodical precision of someone building a case. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday night in March. Caleb had claimed another emergency meeting, leaving me to handle Bella's parent-teacher conference alone. Mrs. Kelly Clyde, Bella's teacher, mentioned how sorry she was that Daddy couldn't make it to the school fundraiser the previous weekend. The fundraiser I had specifically asked Caleb to attend while I visited my sick mother in Colorado Springs. He had lied, not just about that night, but about an entire weekend. The realization hit me like ice water. This wasn't just emotional distance or work stress. This was a deliberate, calculated deception that had been going on for months. That night, I sat in our pristine kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of our perfect life. Bella's artwork covering the refrigerator, wedding photos smiling down from carefully arranged shelves, the coffee maker programmed to brew Caleb's morning cup exactly how he liked it. The domesticity felt like a stage set, beautiful but fundamentally false. I could have hired a private investigator, could have followed him myself or checked his credit card statements, but something inside me rebelled against the idea of skulking through shadows and digging through financial records like a common stalker. If I was going to uncover the truth, it would be on my terms, with my dignity intact. The answer came from the most unexpected source: loneliness. After weeks of pretending everything was normal while my marriage disintegrated in slow motion, I needed to be somewhere that wasn't filled with memories of better times. The Brass Monkey, a dimly lit bar downtown that I'd driven past hundreds of times but never entered, seemed like the perfect place to disappear for a few hours. I told myself I was just going for one drink, maybe two. A brief escape from the suffocating atmosphere of suspicion and false normalcy that had taken over our house. I wasn't looking for answers or confrontation, just a temporary reprieve from being the perfect wife in an imperfect marriage. The bar was exactly what I'd expected. Dark wood, soft jazz, and the kind of anonymous atmosphere where people could nurse their troubles without judgment. I chose a corner booth and ordered a glass of wine, content to watch the Tuesday night regulars and let my mind drift toward anything except lipstick stains and mysterious perfumes. That's when I heard him. "She says I'm boring," the man at the bar was telling the bartender, his words slightly slurred but his pain crystal clear. He took another sip of what looked like whiskey and shook his head with the dejected air of someone whose world had recently tilted off its axis. The bartender, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and the practiced patience of someone who'd heard every sob story imaginable, nodded sympathetically. "Some people don't appreciate what they have," she offered diplomatically.
I gave her everything, the man continued, his voice rising slightly before he caught himself and glanced around the nearly empty bar. Nice house, nice cars, never questioned her shopping trips or girls' nights out. And what do I get? You're not spontaneous enough, Arnold. You don't make me feel alive anymore. His laugh was bitter, the sound of a man who'd discovered that love wasn't enough to keep someone faithful. Arnold, the name echoed in my head as I studied him more carefully. Mid-40s, receding hairline, the slight softness around his middle that came from years of office work and family dinners. He looked like half the husbands in my neighborhood, decent, hardworking men who'd built their lives around providing stability rather than excitement. 23 years, he repeated, staring into his glass as if it might contain answers. And she throws it all away for some guy who probably doesn't even know her middle name. Something in his voice, the particular quality of betrayal that comes from loving someone who's stopped loving you back, made my chest tighten with recognition. This wasn't just any stranger processing a difficult divorce. This was someone living the same nightmare I was, just from the other side of the equation. I stood up before I could talk myself out of it, my wine glass steady in my hand despite the sudden racing of my heart. Sometimes the universe provides exactly what you need, exactly when you need it, even if you didn't know you were looking for it. "Excuse me," I said softly, approaching the bar with the careful steps of someone about to change the course of their entire life. "I couldn't help but overhear, and I hope you don't mind me saying this, but—" I paused, meeting his surprised eyes with what I hoped was genuine sympathy. "I know exactly how you feel, if that makes you feel any better." Arnold Petrillo looked up at me with the suspicious wariness of someone who'd been hurt too many times to trust unexpected kindness. His red-rimmed eyes searched my face for signs of pity or judgment, finding neither. What he saw instead was the mirror image of his own pain, the hollow exhaustion that comes from loving someone who's already moved on. "You do?" he asked, his voice rough with whiskey and emotion. The bartender glanced between us with professional discretion, recognizing the delicate moment unfolding at her counter. I slid onto the bar stool beside him, setting my wine glass down with deliberate care. "My husband has been coming home smelling like perfume that isn't mine for the past 3 months, I said quietly. There's lipstick on his coffee cups, mysterious late meetings that never seem to involve actual work, and a phone that's become surgically attached to his hand." Arnold's expression shifted from suspicion to recognition, then to something that looked almost like relief. "How long have you known?" he asked. "Suspected? 3 months. Known for certain?" I took a sip of wine, surprised by how steady my voice remained. "About 2 weeks ago, when he lied about attending our daughter's school fundraiser. Claimed he had to work, but according to her teacher, he was supposed to be there." I turned slightly to face him more directly. "What about you?" "Found her burner phone last month," Arnold said, his fingers tightening around his glass. "Hidden in her jewelry box like some kind of treasure. 3 months' worth of text messages that would make a sailor blush." He laughed bitterly. "Want to know the worst part?
She'd been deleting them off her regular phone, but kept them on the secret one, like souvenirs.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
The bartender moved away tactfully, giving us the illusion of privacy in the dimly lit space. Around us, the Tuesday night regulars continued their own quiet conversations, oblivious to the alliance forming in their midst. "What's her name?" I asked, though part of me already suspected the answer. "Caroline. Caroline Lohan." He said it like the words tasted sour. 23 years of marriage, 2 kids in college, and she throws it all away for some architect who supposedly understands her creative spirit. Arnold made air quotes with his free hand, his wedding ring catching the bar's amber lighting. My stomach dropped like an elevator cut loose from its cables. "Architect," I repeated slowly, my voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah, some hotshot who designs those fancy office buildings downtown. Real smooth talker, apparently. Makes her feel alive and appreciated in ways I never could." Arnold's face twisted with the particular pain that comes from being compared to someone else and found lacking. According to her love letters, anyway. I set my wineglass down with hands that had begun to tremble slightly. The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity, like a puzzle revealing a picture you never wanted to see completed. "This architect," I said carefully, "does he happen to work at Morrison and Associates?" Arnold's head snapped toward me so quickly I heard his neck pop. "How did you?" His eyes widened as understanding dawned. "Oh my God. Oh my fucking God." We stared at each other across the space of 2 bar stools, 2 strangers who'd just discovered they were living parallel nightmares. The silence stretched between us, heavy with implications neither of us was quite ready to voice. "Caleb Nylan," I said finally, the name hanging in the air like an accusation. "That son of a bitch," Arnold whispered, his face cycling through a range of emotions, shock, anger, and something that might have been grim satisfaction. The bartender reappeared with a fresh cocktail napkin and a questioning look. "Another round?" she asked diplomatically. "Make it a double," Arnold said, then glanced at me. "What are you drinking?" "Wine," I managed, though my throat felt like sandpaper. "Red wine, something strong." As she moved away to prepare our drinks, Arnold and I sat in the strange silence that follows earth-shattering revelations. We were no longer 2 lonely strangers processing separate betrayals. We were allies in the same war, wounded by the same enemy. "How long?" Arnold asked eventually. "I'm not sure exactly. Maybe 4 months, based on when his behavior started changing." I accepted the fresh glass of wine gratefully, needing something to do with my hands. "What about Caroline?" "She's been working late and having girls' nights since February. Always came home looking like she'd been to a spa instead of suffering through overtime or cocktails with her book club." Arnold took a large sip of his whiskey, then shook his head. "I actually complimented her on how happy she seemed, told her the stress relief was doing her good." "Jesus," I breathed, recognizing the cruel irony. "I've been covering for him. When our daughter asks why Daddy misses dinner so often, I tell her he's working hard to take care of us." "We've been enablers," Arnold said, his voice heavy with self-recrimination, "making it easier for them to betray us by being understanding about their absences." I thought about all the times I'd rearranged my schedule to accommodate Caleb's mysterious commitments, the parent-teacher conferences I'd attended alone, the weekend activities I'd managed solo while he claimed work emergencies. Every accommodation had been another opportunity for him to be with her. 23 years, Arnold repeated, staring into his drink. "Caroline and I got married right out of college. I thought we were building something permanent, something that would last. I never questioned her loyalty because she'd never given me reason to." 6 years for us, I said, "but we have Bella, our daughter. She's only 6 years old." The thought of explaining divorce to a first grader made my chest tighten. I keep thinking about how to tell her that Daddy won't be living with us anymore. Arnold's expression softened slightly. Kids are resilient, he offered, though his voice carried the uncertainty of someone trying to convince himself as much as me. My two are in college now, but when they were Bella's age, he trailed off, lost in memories of a family that had once felt secure. The thing is, I said slowly, an idea beginning to form in the wine-hazed corners of my mind, they think they're being so clever, so careful and discreet. Arnold raised an eyebrow. What are you thinking? I met his eyes, seeing my own anger reflected back at me. I'm thinking it's time they learned what happens when their two worlds collide. Arnold leaned forward, his eyes sharpening with the first spark of something other than defeat I'd seen since our conversation began. What exactly are you proposing? I took another sip of wine, letting the idea crystallize before putting it into words. They think they're living in separate bubbles. Your wife doesn't know about me, and my husband doesn't know about you. They've created this perfect little fantasy where they're the only two people who matter. I set my glass down with deliberate precision. What if we popped that bubble? Go on, Arnold said, his voice carrying a note of cautious interest. My daughter's 6th birthday party is in 3 weeks. Big backyard celebration, all the neighbors invited, extended family flying in from out of state. I paused, watching understanding dawn across his features. Caleb's been acting like the devoted family man lately, probably to throw off suspicion. There's no way he'd miss it without causing questions he can't answer. Arnold's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. And Caroline mentioned something about a work event she needs to attend that weekend. Said it was important for her pottery business, some kind of networking opportunity. He laughed humorlessly. I actually encouraged her to go, told her it sounded like a great chance to make connections. So they'll both be there, playing their roles, I continued, the plan gaining momentum in my mind. The devoted husband and father, and the supportive colleague who just happens to show up to what she probably thinks is a casual work gathering. Except they won't be expecting me, Arnold said, his eyes gleaming with the possibility of justice. Or you knowing exactly who Caroline is. I nodded, feeling a surge of satisfaction at the elegance of it. They've been so careful to keep their affair compartmentalized. Caroline doesn't move in our social circles, and you and Caleb have never met. They think they're safe because their worlds don't overlap. But we could change that, Arnold said slowly. One carefully planned introduction at a 6-year-old's birthday party. The bartender refilled our drinks without being asked, her movements discreet as she sensed the shift in our conversation's energy. We were no longer two broken people drowning our sorrows. We were conspirators, planning something that felt dangerously close to justice. There's more to consider, I said, my practical side asserting itself even as my vengeful side reveled in the possibilities. If we're going to do this, we need to be smart about it, deliberate. We can't just show up and start throwing accusations around. Arnold pulled out his phone, scrolling through what looked like text messages. Caroline's been documenting their relationship without realizing it. She saves his messages, takes photos of gifts he gives her, even kept ticket stubs from their dates. His expression darkened. She has a whole shoebox of mementos, like she's a teenager with her first crush. Evidence, I said, understanding. We don't just confront them, we present proof that makes denial impossible. What about your end? Do you have anything concrete? I thought about the credit card statements I'd been afraid to examine too closely, the receipts I'd found in his jacket pockets for restaurants we'd never visited together. Enough to build a case. Dinner receipts for 2 at places he claimed he'd never been, hotel charges on nights he said he was working late at the office. I paused, feeling the familiar ache of betrayal. He's been careless lately, like he wants to get caught. Arnold's phone buzzed with an incoming message. He glanced at it and his jaw tightened. Speak of the devil. Caroline's telling me she'll be out late tomorrow night. Important client meeting, she says. He showed me the screen where her message glowed with its casual lie. Thursday nights are Caleb's regular overtime shifts, I said, recognizing the pattern. He usually doesn't get home until after midnight. Claims the cleaning crew at his office building doesn't arrive until late. Same hotel? Arnold asked. Most likely. The Marriott downtown shows up on our credit card statements pretty regularly. I pulled out my own phone, feeling the strange thrill of turning detective in my own marriage. I could drive by tomorrow night, just to confirm. We could go together, Arnold suggested. 2 people are less conspicuous than one, and if they spot us, he shrugged. What are they going to do? Accuse us of following them? They'd have to admit why they're there together in the first place. The proposal hung between us, weighted with implications that went beyond simple surveillance. We were talking about actively collaborating in exposing our spouses, crossing the line from suspicious partners to coordinated investigators. This isn't just about catching them, I said, slowly, wanting to be clear about what we were contemplating. If we do this, the party, the confrontation, all of it, there's no going back. Our marriages are over either way, but this would make it public, messy, and probably pretty ugly. Arnold was quiet for a long moment, staring at Caroline's message on his phone screen. When he looked up, his eyes held a resolution I hadn't seen before. 23 years of my life, and she threw it away for excitement and passion with someone else's husband. You're right, the marriage is already over. The only question is whether they get to end it on their terms or ours. Caleb's been making me feel crazy, I admitted, gaslighting me when I ask about his late nights, making me doubt my own instincts about what I'm seeing. Part of me wants him to face the consequences publicly, not just slink away to start fresh with his mistress. They want the thrill of an affair without facing the reality of what they're destroying, Arnold said. Maybe it's time they learned that actions have consequences. I raised my wine glass slightly. To making sure they learn that lesson properly. Arnold clinked his whiskey against my glass, the sound sharp and decisive in the dim bar. To popping their perfect little bubble. As we drank to our alliance, I felt something shift inside me. For months, I'd been the victim of someone else's choices, reactive and defensive. Now, for the first time since discovering Caleb's betrayal, I was taking control of the narrative. The birthday party was going to be much more interesting than anyone expected. Thursday evening arrived with the crisp certainty of autumn in Denver, the kind of night that made cheating spouses think they were invisible in the early darkness. Arnold picked me up 3 blocks from my house at 7:30, driving a nondescript Honda that Caroline wouldn't recognize even if she spotted it. We'd agreed that my car was too risky. Caleb knew every detail of my daily routine and would question why I wasn't home putting Bella to bed. Any last-minute doubts? Arnold asked as we merged into downtown traffic. He'd traded his usual business casual for dark jeans and a navy jacket, looking more like someone heading to dinner than conducting reconnaissance on his cheating wife. None, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Caleb left the house at 6, claimed he had to review blueprints for a project deadline. Kissed Bella goodbye and told her daddy would see her in the morning. The memory of my daughter's trusting smile as she hugged him made my chest tighten with rage. Caroline was more elaborate, Arnold said, his knuckles white against the steering wheel. Full makeup, new dress, the perfume she usually saves for special occasions. He laughed bitterly. I actually wished her luck closing the deal. The Marriott's parking garage was dimly lit, perfect for clandestine meetings, and convenient for people who needed to slip in and out without being noticed. Arnold found a spot on the 3rd level with a clear view of the elevator bank, and we settled in to wait with the patience of hunters who knew their prey would eventually appear. There, I said, pointing to a familiar silver BMW pulling into a spot 2 rows away. That's Caleb's car. We watched my husband emerge from his vehicle, checking his appearance in the car window like a teenager preparing for prom. He'd changed clothes since leaving the house. Gone was the rumpled button-down he'd worn to work, replaced by the black polo shirt I'd bought him for our anniversary last year. The irony wasn't lost on me. Confident, Arnold observed, watching Caleb stride toward the elevators with the casual ease of someone who'd made this journey many times before. Why would he? As far as he knows, I'm at home helping Bella with her homework and making sure she brushes her teeth before bed. I pulled out my phone and took several photos of Caleb entering the hotel, the timestamps clearly visible. Perfect husband and father, right on schedule for his weekly betrayal. We waited another 15 minutes before Caroline's white Lexus appeared, sliding into a spot near the elevator with practiced precision. Arnold's breath caught as she stepped out, and I understood why. Caroline Lohan was stunning in the way that made other women instinctively check their own reflections. Tall, blonde, with the kind of effortless elegance that came from years of yoga classes and expensive skincare routines. "She's beautiful," I said quietly, not meaning it as a compliment. "She is," Arnold agreed, his voice hollow. "Always has been. That's probably why I never imagined she'd want someone else." He watched his wife of 23 years check her lipstick in the car's side mirror, the gesture so familiar it made him flinch. "She used to do that before our date nights when we were younger." Caroline disappeared into the elevator wearing a red dress that was definitely not appropriate for a business meeting about pottery installations. The color was bold, confident, designed to catch attention and hold it. This was a woman dressed for seduction, not sales pitches. "Room 847, Arnold said, pulling out his phone to show me a screenshot. "Found it in her browser history when I was checking our shared calendar yesterday." She'd looked up the hotel's room service menu and spa services. "They're not even trying to be discreet anymore," I said, documenting Caroline's arrival with the same methodical precision I'd used for Caleb. "It's like they think they're untouchable." We sat in the car for another hour, gathering evidence and planning our next moves. Arnold had brought a manila folder filled with printed screenshots of Caroline's secret messages, romantic declarations, explicit photos, detailed plans for their future together that apparently included leaving both their spouses once the timing was right. "Look at this one," he said, showing me a text exchange from 2 weeks earlier. Caroline asking if he's told you about their relationship yet, and Caleb saying he's waiting for the perfect moment to end things cleanly. "The perfect moment," I repeated, anger making my voice sharp. As if there's a good way to destroy your family for an affair. I scrolled through the screenshots, each message a fresh betrayal. "They're planning to move in together after your divorce is finalized. Apparently, they've already looked at apartments." "She told me she wanted to try couples counseling," Arnold said, his voice cracking slightly. "2 weeks ago, she suggested we see a therapist to work on our communication issues, all while planning her new life with your husband." The hotel's side entrance opened, and a young couple emerged laughing, arms wrapped around each other with the casual intimacy of people who had nothing to hide. The contrast with our own situation was stark. We were sitting in a parking garage documenting our spouse's betrayal while they enjoyed stolen moments in a hotel room above us. "I keep thinking about what I'll tell Bella," I said, watching the happy couple disappear into the night. "How do you explain to a 6-year-old that Daddy chose someone else over his family?" "You don't," Arnold said quietly. "You tell her that sometimes adults make mistakes, and that she's loved no matter what happens between Mommy and Daddy. The rest, she'll understand when she's older." My phone buzzed with a text from Caleb. "Working late again tonight. Don't wait up. Love you." The casual lie, sent while he was 3 floors above us with another woman, crystallized my resolve. I screenshot the message and added it to our growing collection of evidence. "Ready for phase 2? Arnold asked, starting the car as we prepared to leave. "More than ready," I said, thinking about Bella's birthday party and the surprise guests who would be attending. It's time to start planning the best 6th birthday party Denver has ever seen. The coffee shop Arnold had chosen for our planning meeting was deliberately anonymous. A chain restaurant in a strip mall 20 minutes from both our neighborhoods, where the chances of running into anyone we knew were practically zero. We sat in a corner booth with our laptops open, looking for all the world like business associates collaborating on a mundane project, rather than plotting the spectacular downfall of our cheating spouses. "Guest list first," I said, pulling up the spreadsheet I'd created the night before. "We need the right mix of witnesses. People who matter enough to make this hurt, but not so many that it becomes unmanageable chaos." Arnold reviewed the names I'd compiled, occasionally nodding or raising an eyebrow. Your side is solid. Family members who'll be horrified, neighbors who'll spread the story, and Caleb's colleagues who'll question his professional judgment. What about adding some of Caroline's pottery friends? The ones who think she's this artistic, free spirit living an authentic life. Perfect, I agreed, making notes. Hypocrisy loves an audience of people who've bought into the false narrative. I paused, considering logistics. The timing has to be precise. We need Caroline to arrive after the party's in full swing, when there are enough witnesses, but before people start leaving. She'll come, Arnold said with grim certainty. I've been dropping hints about how impressed I am with Caleb's work, how I'd love to meet the brilliant architect Caroline's been raving about. She thinks she's being clever, arranging to accidentally encounter him at what she believes is a casual neighborhood gathering. I pulled up the photos from our hotel surveillance, studying the timestamps and arrival patterns. They're creatures of habit. Thursday nights at the Marriott, weekend work emergencies that align perfectly, always meeting at restaurants on the opposite side of town from where we live. The predictability would be their downfall.
Caroline's been more reckless lately, Arnold added, scrolling through screenshots on his phone. Listen to this text from yesterday. Can't wait to meet your family properly. Bella sounds so sweet in your stories. She's actually excited about infiltrating your daughter's birthday party. The audacity took my breath away. She wants to meet my daughter? The woman who's been sleeping with Bella's father for months thinks it'll be fun to play pretend family member at her birthday party? I felt my hands clench involuntarily. That seals it. Whatever sympathy I might have had for her just evaporated. Arnold studied the party timeline I'd outlined. So Caroline arrives around 2:30, after most guests have settled in, but before cake time. You introduce me as your friend from work who stopped by to drop off a gift. Natural, casual, no red flags for either of them initially. Exactly. Then we let them enjoy about 20 minutes of thinking they're successfully deceiving everyone. I highlighted the crucial window on my timeline. Long enough for them to relax and maybe even get a little bold with their interactions, but not so long that people start leaving or Bella gets cranky. What's our signal for the revelation? Arnold asked, practical as always. We need a smooth transition from casual introductions to, surprise, we know everything. I considered the various scenarios we'd discussed. Cake cutting. It's the traditional centerpiece moment of any birthday party, when everyone's gathered and paying attention. Plus, it's symbolic, cutting through the sweetness to reveal what's really underneath. And we have all the evidence ready. Photos, messages, hotel receipts, everything organized for maximum impact. I've prepared 2 identical folders, I said, patting my messenger bag, one for each of them, so they can't claim we're making things up or that it's just circumstantial. Every piece of proof they've been careless enough to leave behind, compiled chronologically to tell the complete story of their affair. Arnold looked thoughtful. You know, there's a part of me that feels sorry for the other guests. Your daughter's friends and their parents, the elderly neighbors, they're going to witness something pretty intense. I've thought about that, I admitted. But Caleb made the choice to bring his affair into our family space the moment he decided Caroline should attend Bella's party. And honestly, maybe it's time the community knew exactly who they're dealing with. How many other wives have had doubts about their marriages because Caroline seemed so confident and happy? How many people have trusted Caleb with projects and partnerships while he's been lying to the most important people in his life? Public consequences for public deception. They wanted to play house at a family event, so they get to face family judgment. I closed my laptop with a decisive click. 3 days until the party. Caroline thinks she's about to pull off the perfect infiltration of her lover's family life. Caleb thinks he's successfully compartmentalized his double life. I met Arnold's eyes across the table. Time to show them how wrong they both are. Any final doubts? He asked, echoing his question from our surveillance night. None whatsoever, I said, meaning it completely. They chose this path. We're just making sure they see where it leads. The final 3 days before Bella's party required a performance worthy of Broadway. I had to be the perfect wife planning the perfect celebration while secretly orchestrating the destruction of my marriage.
Every interaction with Caleb became a carefully choreographed dance of normalcy, each smile and casual conversation hiding the explosive knowledge that would soon tear our world apart. The weather forecast looks perfect for Saturday, I mentioned over breakfast Friday morning, buttering Bella's toast while Caleb scrolled through his phone. Sunny and 75 degrees. We won't need the backup indoor plan. Great, he murmured absently, probably texting Caroline about their upcoming public debut as a couple. The irony of him helping to plan his own exposure wasn't lost on me. Bella bounced in her chair, practically vibrating with excitement. "Mommy, will there be face painting? And can we do the treasure hunt we talked about?" Her innocent enthusiasm made my chest tighten with protective rage. This party should have been purely about her joy, not the stage for her father's humiliation. "Everything you wanted, sweetheart," I promised, kissing her forehead. I caught Caleb's eye over Bella's head. "Your colleague Caroline is still planning to stop by, right? I'd hate for her to miss the fun." Caleb's fork paused halfway to his mouth, a micro-expression of panic flickering across his features before he recovered. "She mentioned she might swing by, yeah, nothing definite." The casual lie rolled off his tongue with practiced ease, making me wonder how many others I'd believed over the months. Well, I hope she does. It'll be nice to finally meet her after hearing so much about her work. I kept my voice light, almost bored, as if Caroline Lohan was just another peripheral figure in our social circle, rather than the woman destroying our family. The morning passed in a blur of party preparations that felt surreal given what I knew was coming. I hung rainbow streamers and arranged balloon clusters while mentally rehearsing the moment Arnold would walk through our backyard gate. I set up the gift table and sound system while reviewing the timeline that would end with Caroline's humiliation in front of 30 witnesses. Arnold texted around noon. Caroline just left for her pottery studio, wearing the red dress from Thursday night. She's definitely planning to make an impression.
The detail about the dress was perfect. Caroline had chosen her seduction outfit for what she thought would be a casual family gathering, revealing just how little respect she had for the boundaries between her affair and our family life. She was coming to my daughter's birthday party dressed like she was going on a date with my husband. "Everything okay?" Caleb asked, noticing me staring at my phone. "Just confirming final details with the caterer." I lied smoothly, slipping the phone back into my pocket. "They're running a few minutes late with the sandwich platters, but nothing major. Need help with anything else?" he offered, though his attention was already drifting back to his own phone. Probably coordinating Caroline's arrival time to maximize their stolen moments together. Actually, yes. "Could you move the patio furniture to create more space for the kids' activities? And maybe check that the gate latch is working properly. We'll have people coming and going all afternoon." I watched him head outside, noting how he dressed more carefully than usual for a children's party. Hair perfectly styled, cologne applied, wearing the shirt I'd complimented him on during happier times. The guest confirmations had been trickling in all week, creating the perfect audience for our revelation. My sister Kelly was driving down from Fort Collins with her family. The neighbors from both sides of our street had responded enthusiastically. Even Caleb's business partner Seth had agreed to bring his kids, joking that he needed to see the legendary backyard playground Caleb was always bragging about. Most importantly, my mother-in-law Alicia had confirmed her attendance despite the 2-hour drive from Colorado Springs. Caleb's relationship with his mother was complicated, built on her unwavering belief in his moral character and family devotion. Having her witness his affair reveal would cut deeper than any stranger's judgment could. "Mommy, are you excited about my party?" Bella asked, appearing at my elbow as I arranged the last of the decorations. "More excited than you know, sweetheart," I said, meaning it in ways she couldn't understand. "It's going to be a very special day. One we'll all remember for a long time." She beamed and skipped away to play, blissfully unaware that her father's double life was about to explode in our backyard. Part of me ached for the innocence she was about to lose, but a larger part of me knew she deserved better than growing up in a house built on lies and betrayal. Saturday morning arrived with crystalline clarity, the kind of perfect autumn day that made Denver's suburbs look like a postcard. As I watched Caleb hang the happy 6th birthday Bella banner across our patio, I felt a strange calm settle over me. In 6 hours, everything would be different. In 6 hours, the performance would be over. Time to give them a party they'd never forget. The first guests arrived at noon sharp, transforming our backyard into the kind of suburban celebration that would have made me genuinely happy under different circumstances. Bella raced between her school friends in her rainbow tutu, her face glowing with birthday magic while I smiled and played hostess with the skill of someone who'd perfected the art of compartmentalization. "Alicia, you made it." I embraced my mother-in-law, noting how she'd dressed up for the occasion in her best floral dress and pearl earrings. At 68, she maintained the dignified bearing of a retired school principal, someone whose approval mattered deeply to Caleb. Her presence would make the revelation cut that much deeper. "Wouldn't miss my granddaughter's special day," she said, kissing Bella's cheek before surveying the decorations with obvious approval. "You've outdone yourself, dear. Everything looks perfect." Perfect. The word echoed in my mind as I watched Caleb work the crowd, charming neighbors and colleagues with the easy confidence of someone who believed his secrets were safe. He'd positioned himself near the beverage table, playing the devoted host while keeping one eye on the gate for Caroline's arrival. Seth Clyde appeared at my elbow with his twin boys in tow, both wearing matching superhero capes that Bella immediately admired. "Great party," he commented, accepting a beer from Caleb. "Though I have to say, you two seem unusually relaxed for people hosting 30 kids and their parents." "Practice makes perfect," Caleb replied smoothly, though I caught the slight tension in his shoulders. He was performing just as carefully as I was, projecting the image of a man completely comfortable in his family role. The afternoon unfolded with clockwork precision. Face painting transformed children into tigers and princesses, while parents clustered in conversation groups, their laughter mixing with the sound of kids playing treasure hunt in our carefully manicured garden. I moved through the crowd with practiced ease, refilling drinks and managing logistics while internally counting down the minutes until Arnold's arrival. At 2:15, my phone buzzed with his text, "Parking around the corner. Give me the signal when you're ready." I glanced across the patio to where Caleb was helping Bella organize her birthday gifts, his performance as devoted father so convincing that even I might have believed it if I didn't know better. He kept checking his watch with increasing frequency, clearly expecting Caroline's imminent arrival. "The birthday girl looks like she's having the time of her life," commented Mrs. Henderson from next door, following my gaze to where Bella was giggling with her friends. "You and Caleb have created such a wonderful family atmosphere." "We try our best," I managed, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. Around us the party continued its cheerful rhythm, guests blissfully unaware that they were about to witness the spectacular implosion of what they considered a model marriage. "He's my husband," Caroline whispered, the admission falling into the crowd like a stone into still water. The ripples of shock spread outward, as guests processed the implications of a married woman attending another family's celebration, while her husband appeared unexpectedly. "Your husband," Caleb repeated slowly, his face cycling through emotions too quickly to catalogue. "Caroline, you said you were divorced." The lie hung in the air like smoke, visible to everyone present. Arnold's bitter laughter provided the soundtrack to Caroline's complete humiliation as her deception unraveled in front of 30 witnesses who would remember this moment for years to come. "Divorced?" Arnold shook his head, pulling out his phone to display their wedding photo from last Christmas. 23 years married, Caroline. Though apparently that means less to you than I thought. Bella appeared at my side, tugging on my dress with the innocent confusion of a child who sensed adult tension without understanding its source. Mommy, why is everyone looking sad at my party? The question cut through the drama like a knife, reminding everyone present that we were supposed to be celebrating a 6-year-old's birthday, not witnessing the public destruction of 2 marriages. But there was no going back now. The collision had happened, and the debris field was spreading with unstoppable momentum. "It's okay, sweetheart," I said, kneeling to her level while keeping my eyes on the disaster unfolding across our patio. Sometimes grown-ups have important conversations at parties. "Why don't you go show Grandma Alicia your new art supplies?" As Bella skipped away, blissfully unaware that her world was about to change forever, I stood and faced the 3 people who had brought us to this moment. Caroline's perfect red dress, Caleb's protective stance, and Arnold's righteous anger created a triangle of betrayal that our entire community was now witnessing. Time for the final act. The silence stretched like a wire about to snap. 30 adults and twice as many children had formed an unconscious amphitheater around the unfolding drama, their birthday party cheer replaced by the kind of horrified fascination usually reserved for car accidents. Even the hired face painter had set down her brushes, unwilling to miss what was clearly the social event of the decade. "I think," I said with deliberate calm, my voice cutting through the tension like a conductor calling an orchestra to attention, "it's time we all got properly acquainted." I moved toward the gift table where I'd strategically placed my messenger bag earlier, extracting 2 manila folders with the ceremonial precision of a lawyer presenting evidence. Caleb's eyes widened as he recognized the folders, the same type I used for organizing his business presentations. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice cracking slightly on the last word. "Sharing some interesting reading material," I replied, handing the first folder to Caroline. "Since you've taken such an interest in my family, I thought you might enjoy seeing the documentation of your relationship with my husband." Caroline's hands shook as she opened the folder, her face going from pale to ashen as she recognized the printed screenshots of her own text messages. The romantic declarations she'd thought were private, the explicit photos she'd sent, the detailed plans for their future together, all of it organized chronologically like exhibits in a trial. "How did you?" she started, then stopped, realizing the question only confirmed her guilt. "The second folder is for you, darling," I said to Caleb, my tone maintaining the same pleasant hostess voice I'd used all afternoon. "Your credit card statements, hotel receipts, and some particularly illuminating text messages, where you discuss the perfect timing for leaving your boring wife and daughter." Seth stepped closer, his expression shifting from confusion to disgust as he realized what he was witnessing. "Jesus Christ, Caleb, at your daughter's birthday party. This isn't what it looks like," Caleb said weakly, though the evidence in his hands made denial impossible. Around us, the crowd was processing the revelation with varying degrees of shock and outrage. My mother-in-law Alicia stood frozen near the beverage table, her hand pressed to her mouth as if trying to hold back words that couldn't be unsaid. Arnold moved to stand beside me, his presence solid and reassuring in the chaos we'd orchestrated. "Actually, it's exactly what it looks like," he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd been living this nightmare for months. "A married man and a married woman conducting an affair, thinking they were clever enough to bring their deception into family spaces. You planned this," Caroline accused, finally finding her voice as she gestured wildly between Arnold and me. "This whole thing is a setup." "Yes," I agreed without shame, feeling the weight of 3 months' worth of suppressed anger finally finding its voice. "We planned to expose you at a family event because you made our families part of your deception. You wanted to play house at my daughter's birthday party, so now you get to face the consequences in front of our community. The crowd was beginning to fracture into camps. Kelly moved protectively to my side, her teacher instincts recognizing injustice when she saw it. Mrs. Henderson was whispering furiously to her husband, their expressions broadcasting judgment that would spread through the neighborhood within hours. Even the children seemed to sense that something momentous was happening, clustering near their parents with the instinctive wariness of young animals sensing danger. 23 years, Arnold said, his voice breaking slightly as he addressed his wife directly. 23 years of marriage, and you threw it away for this. For stolen hotel rooms and lies to both our families.
At 2:25, Caroline's white Lexus appeared through our front window, parking with the casual confidence of someone who believed she belonged here. I watched her check her reflection in the rearview mirror, applying fresh lipstick before stepping out in the same red dress she'd worn to the hotel. The audacity was breathtaking. She was treating my daughter's birthday party like a date with my husband. Showtime, I murmured to myself, pulling out my phone to text Arnold. She's here. Come around back in 3 minutes. Caroline appeared at our backyard gate like a vision in scarlet, her blonde hair perfectly styled, and her smile radiating the kind of confidence that came from believing you were about to pull off the perfect deception. She carried a beautifully wrapped gift that probably cost more than most of the other presents combined, guilt money disguised as generosity. "You must be Caroline," I called out, moving toward the gate with the enthusiasm of a hostess meeting an anticipated guest. "Caleb's told me so much about your work. Welcome to our chaos." Her smile faltered slightly at my warmth, probably expecting coolness or suspicion rather than genuine friendliness. "Thank you for having me," she said, her voice carrying the slight nervousness of someone entering enemy territory without realizing it. "I hope I'm not intruding on family time." "Not at all. The more the merrier." I guided her toward the main group, noting how Caleb's entire posture changed when he spotted her. His casual confidence transformed into something electric, charged with the kind of energy that came from stolen moments and forbidden attraction. "Caroline, you need it," he said, his voice carefully neutral for the crowd, while his eyes conveyed messages meant only for her. The intimacy was subtle but unmistakable to anyone who knew what to look for. "Wouldn't miss it," she replied, her hand brushing his as he took her gift to add to Bella's pile. The touch lasted a fraction too long, and I saw several guests notice the interaction with varying degrees of curiosity. Perfect. Let them start wondering about the dynamic between my husband and this beautiful stranger who'd appeared at our family celebration. Arnold would be walking through that gate in exactly 90 seconds, and then the real party would begin. Arnold's entrance was a masterpiece of casual timing. As Caroline finished introducing herself to my sister Kelly, complimenting Bella's dress with the practiced charm of someone accustomed to winning people over, the back gate opened with a soft creak that somehow cut through all the party noise like a blade. "I hope I'm not too late," Arnold called out, holding a brightly wrapped present and wearing the kind of apologetic smile that immediately endeared him to the gathered crowd. He'd chosen his outfit perfectly, khakis and a button-down shirt that screamed reliable family friend rather than vengeful husband on a mission. "Arnold!" I exclaimed with genuine warmth, moving toward him with the enthusiasm of someone greeting an old friend. "Everyone, this is Arnold Petrillo. He works in marketing downtown and heard about our little celebration." The lie rolled off my tongue effortlessly, years of social training making the deception feel natural. Caroline's champagne glass froze halfway to her lips. Even from across the patio, I could see the color drain from her face as she processed the impossible sight of her husband standing in her lover's backyard. Her carefully constructed world of compartmentalized deception had just collided with reality in the most spectacular way possible. Caleb's reaction was equally priceless. His confident host persona cracked like thin ice, replaced by the wide-eyed panic of someone watching their worst nightmare unfold in slow motion. He looked between Arnold and Caroline with the desperate confusion of a man trying to solve an equation that shouldn't exist. "Arnold Petrillo," my mother-in-law repeated thoughtfully. accepting his handshake with her usual gracious manner. That's an interesting coincidence. Caroline was just telling us about her husband Arnold, who works in marketing. Such a small world. The silence that followed was delicious. Arnold and Caroline stared at each other across 30 feet of suburban paradise, while the party guests began to sense that something significant was happening, even if they couldn't identify exactly what. Conversations died mid-sentence as people turned to watch the tableau unfolding near the gift table. "Caroline," Arnold said, his voice carrying perfectly across the suddenly quiet patio, "what are you doing here?" This is," Caroline stammered, her usual eloquence abandoning her at the moment she needed it most. Her eyes darted between Arnold, Caleb, and the growing circle of fascinated witnesses, looking for an escape route that didn't exist. Caleb stepped forward instinctively, positioning himself slightly between Caroline and Arnold, in a gesture so protective it made their relationship obvious to anyone paying attention. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his architect's brain apparently still trying to construct a logical explanation for this impossible scenario. "Problem?" Arnold laughed, the sound sharp enough to make several children stop playing and look toward the adults. "Corona? What is he talking about?" asked Kelly, her protective sister instincts kicking in as she moved closer to me. "How do you know this man?" Caroline's composure finally cracked completely. "You don't understand," she said, tears streaming down her face and ruining her carefully applied makeup. "Caleb makes me feel alive in ways you never could. We have a connection that transcends ordinary marriage." The pretentious justification landed like a lead balloon among the gathered neighbors and family members. Several people actually rolled their eyes at her dramatic declaration, while others shook their heads in disgust at the cliché excuse. "Connection," my mother-in-law repeated, her voice dripping with the disdain of someone who'd taught high school for 40 years and heard every excuse imaginable. "Is that what you call abandoning your responsibilities and betraying the people who trusted you?" Caleb tried one last desperate play. "Mom, please, you don't understand the whole situation. Things between us have been difficult for—" "Don't." The single word from Alicia carried enough force to stop him mid-sentence. "Don't you dare try to blame her for your choices. That woman has given you everything, and this is how you repay her? At your daughter's birthday party?" The shame in Caleb's face was complete, his shoulders sagging under the weight of public judgment from the person whose opinion mattered most to him. Around us, the party guests were beginning to make their exit calculations, sensing that the celebration was definitively over. But I wasn't finished yet. There was still one more revelation that would ensure this moment lived in neighborhood legend forever. "Actually," I said, my voice cutting through the murmur of shocked conversations, "there's something else you all should know." The crowd, which had been shifting restlessly as people contemplated polite exits, froze at my words. Even the children seemed to sense that whatever was coming next would be the climax of an afternoon they'd remember for the rest of their lives. I reached into my messenger bag once more, withdrawing a thick envelope that I'd sealed just that morning. 3 weeks ago, when Arnold and I first met and realized our spouses were having an affair, we made a decision, I began, my voice carrying clearly across the silent patio. We could have handled this privately, through lawyers and mediation. We could have protected everyone's dignity and kept the community out of our personal business. Caleb's face was cycling through hope and terror, probably wondering if I was about to offer some kind of reconciliation. Caroline clutched Arnold's evidence folder against her chest like armor, mascara streaking down her cheeks in dark rivers. "But then," I continued, opening the envelope with deliberate slowness, "we discovered something that changed everything. Something that made us realize this affair wasn't just about two selfish people hurting their families. It was about a pattern of deception that went much deeper." I pulled out a stack of photographs, the kind that came from private investigators with telephoto lenses and unlimited patience. The images were crystal clear. Caleb and Caroline, at restaurants, entering hotels, shopping for furniture together at stores across town. But more importantly, they showed dates. timestamps that told a story more damning than any text message. "These photos go back 8 months," I announced, holding up the first image. 8 months, not the 4 months we originally thought. Which means, Caroline, you were planning your affair before you told Arnold you wanted couples counseling. And Caleb, you were sleeping with another man's wife when you convinced me to start trying for a second baby. The gasp from the crowd was audible. Several parents instinctively pulled their children closer, as if infidelity might be contagious. My mother-in-law Alicia made a sound like she'd been physically struck, her hand gripping the back of a patio chair for support. "A second baby?" Kelly whispered, her voice carrying in the absolute silence that had fallen over the gathering. "That's right," I said, my calm facade finally cracking to reveal the fury I'd been suppressing for months. While I was charting ovulation cycles and taking prenatal vitamins, my husband was planning his exit strategy with his mistress. While I was imagining giving Bella a sibling, he was telling another woman that I was the obstacle to their happiness. I pulled out another photograph, this one showing Caleb and Caroline at a jewelry store downtown. This was taken 6 weeks ago. They were shopping for engagement rings. Apparently, the plan was for both of them to file for divorce simultaneously, then get engaged after a respectable waiting period. Arnold stepped forward, his own anger finally breaking through his controlled demeanor. "She told me she needed space to find herself," he said, his voice thick with betrayal. "Said she was thinking about taking art classes and maybe traveling solo for a while. Meanwhile, she was planning her engagement to another woman's husband." Caroline finally found her voice, though it came out as a broken whisper. "It wasn't supposed to happen this way. We never meant to hurt anyone." "You never meant to get caught," corrected Mrs. Henderson, her retired teacher's authority cutting through Caroline's self-pity like a knife. Seth shook his head in disgust, pulling out his own phone. "I need to call the office," he said to no one in particular. "The partnership can't be associated with this kind of behavior. Jesus, Caleb, what were you thinking?" The professional consequences were clearly just beginning to dawn on my husband. His face went gray as he realized that his personal betrayal was about to become a professional catastrophe. Architects rely on trust and reputation. Clients didn't want to work with men who deceive their own families. "The worst part," I continued, my voice growing stronger with each revelation, "is that they plan to use this party as their coming out event. Caroline was going to accidentally meet our family and friends, establish herself as a lovely person who just happened to connect with my soon-to-be ex-husband. They were going to use my daughter's birthday as the foundation for their public relationship." The crowd's anger was palpable now, shifting from shocked fascination to righteous indignation. These weren't strangers witnessing drama. These were neighbors, friends, and family members who'd been unknowingly recruited as props in Caroline and Caleb's deception. "So yes," I concluded, folding the photographs back into their envelope, "Arnold and I planned this confrontation because some betrayals are too calculating, too cruel to be handled with quiet dignity. Sometimes the only appropriate response to public deception is public consequences." Bella appeared at my side again, her small hand slipping into mine with the instinctive comfort-seeking of a child who sensed her world shifting. "Mommy," she whispered, "can we have cake now?" The innocent question broke the spell that had held the crowd transfixed. Reality came rushing back. This was still a 6-year-old's birthday party, and that 6-year-old deserved better than watching her family implode. "Of course, sweetheart," I said, squeezing her hand. "Let's cut your birthday cake." It was time for the final act. The birthday cake sat on the picnic table like an island of innocence in the storm we'd created. 3 layers of rainbow sponge, decorated with unicorns and flowers, the kind of magical confection that should have been the highlight of a perfect celebration. Instead, it became the stage for the final act of our carefully orchestrated revelation. "Everyone gather around for the birthday song," I announced with forced cheerfulness, though half the guests were already backing toward the gate with mumbled excuses about early dinners and prior commitments. The remaining crowd formed a reluctant circle around the table, their faces wearing the strained expressions of people trapped between social obligation and the desperate desire to escape. Bella bounced beside me, miraculously still glowing with birthday excitement, despite the adult drama swirling around her. At 6, she understood that something important was happening, but remained blissfully unaware that her father's betrayal was playing out in front of our entire community. "Make a wish, sweetheart," I said, lighting the candles with hands that remained remarkably steady despite everything. As my daughter closed her eyes and took that deep breath children save for birthday magic, I caught Caleb's gaze across the table. He looked like a man watching his life burn down in real time. His architect's precision had been replaced by the hollow-eyed panic of someone who just realized that careful planning meant nothing when your foundation was built on lies. Caroline stood beside him, no longer the confident seductress who'd waltzed into our backyard, but a broken woman in a red dress that now seemed garish against her tear-stained face. Bella blew out her candles to scattered applause, the sound thin and awkward compared to the enthusiastic cheering that should have accompanied the moment. I picked up the silver cake server, the same one we'd used for our wedding 5 years earlier, and began cutting precise slices with surgical calm. "Caroline, would you like some cake?" I asked pleasantly, extending a plate toward my husband's mistress. Caroline stared at the offered plate as if it might contain poison, her earlier confidence completely shattered. "I should go," she whispered, backing away from the table. "Nonsense," I said, my voice maintaining that same hostess warmth that had carried me through the entire afternoon. "You came to celebrate with our family. Stay for cake. It's what neighbors do." The word neighbors hit like a physical blow. Around us, the actual neighbors, people who would live on our street long after the scandal had faded, watched with the fascination of people witnessing history in the making. This story would be told at block parties and backyard barbecues for years to come. Arnold accepted his slice with grim appreciation, understanding that every moment Caroline remained at the party deepened her humiliation. "Thank you," he said formally. "It's been quite an enlightening afternoon." "Daddy, aren't you having cake?" asked, noticing that Caleb remained frozen beside the table, his hands empty and his face gray. The innocent question forced him to move, to accept a plate and pretend normalcy for his daughter's sake. But his hands shook so violently that raspberry filling slid off the fork before reaching his mouth, leaving red stains on his shirt that looked disturbingly like blood. "You know what's funny?" I said conversationally, taking a delicate bite of cake while the remaining guests watched in horrified fascination. 3 months ago, I was planning to surprise Caleb with news that I was pregnant again. I had this whole romantic evening planned, dinner at the restaurant where we had our first date, a special dessert with the pregnancy test hidden inside. The revelation hit Caleb like a physical blow. His plate slipped from nerveless fingers, shattering against the patio stones in an explosion of ceramic and cake that made several people jump. "But then," I continued, my voice never wavering from its pleasant conversational tone, "different perfume on his clothes, mysterious charges on our credit card, phone calls he took in another room. So instead of planning romantic surprises, I started planning something else entirely." Caroline made a choking sound, her hand pressed to her mouth as if she might actually be sick. The red dress that had seemed so bold and confident now looked like a scarlet letter, marking her guilt for everyone to see. "The pregnancy test was negative, by the way," I added, meeting Caleb's horrified eyes across the wreckage of his dropped plate. "Turns out it's hard to conceive when your husband is investing his energy elsewhere." My mother-in-law, Alicia, moved toward me with the slow, careful steps of someone navigating a minefield. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice breaking on the endearment. "I'm so sorry. I had no idea." "Of course you didn't," I said, allowing her to pull me into a fierce embrace that smelled like her familiar lavender perfume and righteous anger. Caleb has always been very good at maintaining appearances. The last of the party guests were streaming toward the gate now, their children clutched protectively against their sides as they fled the wreckage of what should have been a simple birthday celebration. But Arnold and I weren't finished yet. There was still one final surprise waiting. As the last of the fleeing guests disappeared through our backyard gate, I reached into my messenger bag one final time. The envelope I withdrew was different from the others, heavier, official-looking, with the kind of legal letterhead that made people's stomachs drop before they even read the contents. There's one more thing, I said, my voice cutting through the awkward silence that had settled over our decimated party. Only the core players remained now. Caleb and Caroline frozen in their shame, Arnold standing supportively beside me, my mother-in-law Alicia clutching Bella protectively, and my sister Kelly documenting everything with the horrified fascination of someone watching a train wreck. I think we've all had enough revelations for one day, Caleb said weakly, his voice barely above a whisper. He was staring at the scattered remains of his cake plate as if he could somehow piece together more than just the broken ceramic. Actually, you haven't seen anything yet, I replied, opening the envelope with the same deliberate precision I'd used for everything else that afternoon. You see, while you two were planning your romantic future together, Arnold and I were doing some planning of our own. I pulled out a thick stack of legal documents, each page bearing official seals and signatures that commanded immediate attention. Caroline's eyes widened as she recognized the formatting. She'd seen enough legal paperwork during her pottery business incorporation to understand what she was looking at. Divorce papers, I announced, cheerfully, as if I were discussing the weather. Filed simultaneously this morning in Denver County Court. Both marriages dissolved on grounds of adultery, with comprehensive documentation of the affair included as evidence. The silence that followed was so complete, I could hear the neighbor's sprinkler system cycling 3 houses away. Caleb's face went from gray to green as the implications hit him, while Caroline swayed slightly as if she might faint right there on our patio. But that's not the best part, Arnold added, his voice carrying the satisfaction of someone who'd been waiting months to deliver this particular blow. We also filed restraining orders preventing either of you from contacting our children, and we've submitted formal complaints to your respective professional organizations. Professional organizations? Caroline repeated weakly. The Colorado Pottery Guild takes a dim view of members who misrepresent their marital status to clients and colleagues, I explained pleasantly. Apparently, several of your recent commissions came from married couples who specifically sought out your services because they believed you understood the sanctity of marriage. Caleb was shaking his head in denial, his architect's mind finally grasping the full scope of what we'd orchestrated. You can't do this. You can't destroy our careers over a personal matter. Personal matter? Alicia's voice cracked like a whip across the patio. You brought your affair into your daughter's birthday party and called it a personal matter? She turned to me with fierce pride. Sweetheart, you've handled this with more grace than either of them deserved. There's more, I continued, savoring the look of growing panic in Caleb's eyes. Since you two were so thoughtful in documenting your relationship with photos and text messages, we've included everything in the court filings, public record, available to anyone who requests it. The true genius of our plan was becoming clear to them now. We hadn't just exposed their affair to our social circle, we've made it part of the legal record, ensuring that their deception would follow them professionally and personally for years to come. The hotel receipts were particularly helpful, Arnold added. Amazing how they documented your relationship timeline so clearly. 8 months of evidence, all charged to credit cards that will now be scrutinized during asset division. Caroline finally found her voice, but it came out as a broken whisper. We never meant for it to go this far. It was just supposed to be a harmless affair, I finished for her. A little excitement that wouldn't hurt anyone. The problem with that theory, Caroline, is that you made it hurt everyone. You involved our children, our families, our community. You turned our homes into stages for your deception. Bella tugged on my dress, her small face creased with the confusion of a child who sensed that important grown-up things were happening, but couldn't quite understand what. Mommy, why is everyone so sad at my party? The innocent question cut through our carefully orchestrated revenge like a knife, reminding us all that a 6-year-old child was watching her world change in ways she couldn't comprehend. I knelt beside her, pulling her close with hands that finally began to shake as the adrenaline of the afternoon started to wear off. Sometimes adults make mistakes, sweetheart, I said softly, my voice gentle in a way it hadn't been for the past hour. But that doesn't change how much you're loved. Are you and Daddy getting divorced like Tommy's parents did? She asked with the directness that only children possess. I looked up at Caleb, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time in months, not as the husband I'd loved or the enemy I'd defeated, but as a broken man who'd lost everything for the promise of something better that would now never materialize. "Yes, baby," I said quietly, "we are." The silence that followed my admission to Bella stretched like a held breath, broken only by the distant sound of our neighbors' sprinkler systems and the fading laughter of children playing in yards where birthday parties hadn't imploded into public scandals. My daughter processed the information with the startling resilience of childhood, nodding solemnly before brightening with a question that somehow managed to be both heartbreaking and practical. "Can I still have sleepovers at Daddy's new house?" she asked, looking between Caleb and me with the innocent expectation that adults would somehow make everything work out reasonably. Caleb's composure finally cracked completely. He sank onto one of our patio chairs as if his legs could no longer support him, burying his face in his hands while his shoulders shook with what might have been sobs or laughter. The kind of breakdown that happens when someone realizes they've lost everything they actually cared about while chasing something they only thought they wanted. "We'll figure out all the details later, sweetheart," I said, stroking Bella's hair while keeping my eyes on the wreckage we'd created. My mother-in-law moved with the swift efficiency of someone who understood that children needed protection from adult consequences. "Come on, little one," she said, taking Bella's hand with gentle firmness. "I think I saw some of those animated movies you like in the living room." As they headed toward the house, Alicia paused beside my chair, placing a weathered hand on my shoulder. "You did what you had to do," she said quietly, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd raised children and buried a husband and understood that sometimes life required difficult choices. The distinction hit Caleb like a physical blow, and I saw him flinch at his mother's words. In choosing Caroline, he'd stopped being part of our family and become a threat to it instead. Caroline had been standing frozen near the gate like a deer caught in headlights, but Alicia's departure seemed to break whatever spell had been holding her in place. "I should go," she whispered, her voice so quiet I almost didn't hear it over the sound of my own heartbeat. "Yes, you should," Arnold agreed, his tone carrying none of the warmth he'd probably once reserved for his wife of 23 years. But not with him, not anymore. The possessive way he said him while looking at Caleb made the final dynamic clear. Caroline and Caleb's affair had been exposed, but their future together had been destroyed in the process. They'd sacrificed their marriages for each other, only to discover that their relationship couldn't survive the harsh light of public scrutiny and legal consequences. "Caroline, wait," Caleb said, finally lifting his head from his hands as she turned toward the gate. The desperation in his voice was audible, a man watching his escape route disappear along with everything else he'd lost that afternoon. She paused without turning around, her shoulders rigid beneath the red dress that had seemed so seductive hours earlier, but now looked like a costume from a play that had ended badly. "Don't," she said, her voice carrying a finality that made Caleb's face crumple again. 23 years, Arnold said conversationally, as if he were discussing the weather rather than watching his marriage officially end in our backyard. 23 years of building a life together, and she's walking away from both of us without looking back. Caroline's hand was on the gate latch now, her escape just seconds away. But she turned back one final time, her mascara-streaked face a portrait of someone who'd finally understood the true cost of her choices. "I thought love was supposed to feel different," she said. "I thought it was supposed to make everything better, not destroy everything good you already had." The admission hung in the air like smoke, a confession that arrived too late to save anything, but perhaps offered some small measure of self-awareness in the wreckage. Then she was gone, disappearing through our gate and leaving behind only the echo of her heels on the sidewalk and the expensive perfume that would probably linger in our backyard for days. Caleb stared at the empty space where she'd been standing, his face cycling through emotions too complex for easy identification. Loss, relief, regret, and something that might have been gratitude all warred for dominance in his expression. "She's not coming back," he said finally, the words carrying the weight of absolute certainty. No, I agreed, surprised by the lack of satisfaction in my voice. She's not.
Arnold pulled out his phone, scrolling through what looked like a contact list. I should call a lawyer. Start the process of picking up the pieces. He glanced at Caleb with something that wasn't quite sympathy, but wasn't hatred either. You might want to do the same. The practical reality of divorce was settling over us like dust after an explosion, bringing with it the mundane details that would define our lives for months to come. The three of us sat in the ruins of what had been a perfect suburban birthday party, surrounded by deflated balloons and abandoned cake plates that seemed to mock the celebration we'd planned. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across our patio, creating a surreal atmosphere where the cheerful decorations felt like props from a play that had taken a very dark turn. I need to know, Caleb said finally, his voice hoarse from the emotional devastation of the past hour. How long have you two been planning this? Arnold and I exchanged glances, the kind of wordless communication that develops between allies who've been through a campaign together. 3 weeks, I replied. Since the night we met at the Brass Monkey and realized our spouses were destroying both our families. The Brass Monkey, Caleb repeated, his face cycling through the kind of calculations architects make when trying to reconstruct a timeline. That was the night I told Caroline I had to work late because of the Morrison project deadline. And the night Caroline told me she was attending a pottery workshop, Arnold added. Funny how creative you both became with your alibis, considering you were actually planning her infiltration of your family celebration. The weight of their deception was settling over Caleb like a physical burden, his shoulders sagging as he processed the full scope of what they'd attempted. She was so excited about meeting Bella, he said quietly. Said she couldn't wait to see what kind of father I was, whether I was different with my family than I was with her. That's what makes this so unforgivable, I said, my voice gaining strength as the protective fury returned. You brought your affair into our daughter's life. You were going to use a 6-year-old's birthday party as your coming-out event as a couple. Arnold stood and began collecting the abandoned cake plates with methodical precision, his movements carrying the careful control of someone processing grief through action. The divorce papers will be served officially on Monday, he said, without looking up. Both of you will need legal representation, though I suspect finding lawyers willing to take cases this publicly documented might be challenging. Publicly documented, Caleb echoed, understanding finally dawning in his eyes. The court filings, the evidence you've submitted, it's all going to be public record. Every text message, every hotel receipt, every lie you told your families, I confirmed. Your affair is now part of the permanent legal record in Denver County. Anyone who wants to know why our marriages ended will have access to the complete story. The implications were clearly hitting Caleb in waves. His architecture firm valued discretion and family stability. Partners who couldn't maintain their personal lives were rarely trusted with major projects or client relationships. The professional consequences would ripple outward for years, affecting not just his income but his reputation throughout the industry. Seth already said he's calling the office, Caleb said, his voice barely above a whisper. The partnership won't survive this kind of scandal. No, Arnold agreed without sympathy. It probably won't. Actions have consequences, even for successful architects who think they're too clever to get caught. From inside the house, I could hear the faint sound of Bella's laughter mixing with Alicia's gentle voice as they settled in to watch a movie. The normalcy of it, grandmother and granddaughter, creating a bubble of innocence, while the adult world imploded outside, made my chest tighten with protective determination. I want you to understand something, I said. my voice carrying the absolute certainty of someone who'd found their moral center in the midst of chaos. Everything that happened here today, everything that's going to happen during the divorce proceedings, every consequence you're going to face, you chose all of it the moment you decided Caroline was worth more than your family. Caleb looked up at me with eyes that held no fight left, just the hollow exhaustion of someone who'd finally understood the true cost of their choices. I know, he said simply. I thought I could have both. I thought I could keep you and Bella safe while exploring something that made me feel alive again. Alive, I repeated, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. You felt alive while lying to your daughter every night, alive while planning to abandon the family that trusted you, alive while using our home as a staging ground for your deception. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, he said, the classic refrain of someone whose careful plans had encountered the immovable force of consequences. How was it supposed to happen? Arnold asked, genuine curiosity coloring his voice. What was the fantasy ending you two had planned? Caleb was quiet for so long I thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the defeated tone of someone confessing to crimes they could no longer justify. We thought we'd file for divorce simultaneously, claim irreconcilable differences, and then after a respectful waiting period, we'd announce our relationship. Clean, civilized, minimal damage to everyone involved. Minimal damage, I said, letting the phrase hang in the air like an accusation. To everyone except the families you were planning to discard. The truth of it settled over us like ashes from a fire, marking the end of everything we'd built, and the beginning of whatever came next.
6 months later, I stood in the same backyard where we'd destroyed 2 marriages on a sunny Saturday afternoon, but everything had changed. The rainbow birthday decorations were long gone, replaced by the subtle signs of a life rebuilt from scratch. New patio furniture that belonged entirely to me, a vegetable garden where Bella and I grew tomatoes and herbs, and a swing set that her grandfather had installed during one of his increasingly frequent visits. Arnold appeared through the gate carrying coffee and wearing the comfortable smile of someone who'd learned to find peace in unexpected places. Our friendship had evolved naturally, from allied conspirators to something deeper. 2 people who'd survived the wreckage of betrayal and discovered they actually enjoyed each other's company when it wasn't focused on revenge. "Any word from the lawyers?" he asked, settling into the chair beside mine as we watched Bella practice cartwheels on the grass with the determined concentration of a 7-year-old perfecting an important skill. "Final decree came through yesterday," I replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. "It's official. I'm a divorced woman with full custody and a very comfortable settlement." The house, the savings, and half of Caleb's business assets had come to me, along with child support payments that would ensure Bella's future remained secure, despite her father's choices. Arnold's own divorce had been finalized 2 months earlier, a process made easier by Caroline's complete disappearance from Denver. She'd left town 3 days after the birthday party, reportedly moving to Santa Fe to start fresh with her pottery and whatever remained of her savings after the legal fees. "Have you heard anything about how he's adjusting?" Arnold asked, though we both knew the answer would be complicated. Caleb's professional life had imploded exactly as predicted. The architecture firm had dissolved within weeks, his reputation too damaged for clients who valued stability and trustworthiness. He'd found work with a smaller firm in Boulder, a significant step down that came with salary cuts and public transportation commutes that reminded him daily of everything he'd lost. "He sees Bella every other weekend," I said, watching our daughter attempt a particularly ambitious flip. "Court-supervised visits until the psychologist determines he's emotionally stable enough for unsupervised time. She comes back confused sometimes, asking why Daddy lives in such a small apartment and why he seems so sad all the time." The supervised visits had been Arnold's suggestion during our legal strategy sessions, a protective measure that ensured Bella's welfare while Caleb processed the complete destruction of the life he'd built. The court-appointed psychologist had been blunt in her assessment. Caleb exhibited signs of severe depression and poor decision-making that made him a potential risk to himself and others. "Kids are resilient," Arnold said, echoing the words he'd offered that first night at the Brass Monkey. She's adjusting better than any of us expected. It was true. Bella had processed the divorce with the matter-of-fact acceptance that children bring to major life changes when the adults around them maintain stability and honesty. She missed her father, but hadn't asked difficult questions about why he'd chosen to leave, perhaps sensing that some adult explanations were too complex for 7-year-old understanding. The interesting thing, I said, taking a sip of coffee while watching my daughter's determined practice session, is how much better our house feels now, lighter somehow, like we can finally breathe properly. Arnold nodded, understanding the sensation completely. His own home had undergone a similar transformation after Caroline's departure. Spaces that had felt tense and artificial now carried the comfortable ease of authentic living. No more walking on eggshells, no more wondering what secrets are hiding behind every conversation. Speaking of conversations, I said, turning to face him with the kind of smile that had become natural over our months of friendship, Bella's been asking when you're going to teach her how to fish. Apparently, the idea of catching our own dinner appeals to her sense of adventure. This weekend, he suggested, his eyes lighting up with the genuine enthusiasm he'd rediscovered since escaping his marriage to Caroline. The easy domesticity of our arrangement had surprised everyone, including us. What had begun as an alliance of convenience had evolved into something neither of us had been looking for but both had needed. Companionship built on mutual respect rather than romantic fantasy, partnership based on shared values rather than desperate attraction. "Mommy, look," Bella called out, finally landing her cartwheel with the triumph of someone who'd mastered an important life skill. "Beautiful, sweetheart," I called back, applauding her success with the genuine pride that came from watching your child grow stronger and more confident despite the challenges life had thrown at her. Arnold applauded too, and I noticed how naturally he'd slipped into the role of supportive adult in Bella's life, not trying to replace her father, but offering stability and encouragement that helped fill the void Caleb's choices had created. "You know what the best part is?" I said, settling back into my chair as Bella moved on to practicing handstands against the fence. "What's that?" "We built something real from the ashes of something false. That feels like the ultimate victory." 1 year later, on a crisp October afternoon that mirrored the day we'd destroyed our old lives, I found myself preparing for another birthday party. But this time, the guest list was carefully curated with people who genuinely cared about our family. The decorations reflected Bella's actual preferences rather than someone else's agenda, and the only surprise I was planning involved a new bicycle hidden in the garage. 7 years old, Arnold mused, helping me hang streamers while Bella was at school. Hard to believe it's only been a year since everything changed. "Sometimes it feels like a lifetime," I replied, stepping back to admire our work. "Other times it feels like yesterday that we were sitting in that bar, two strangers drowning our sorrows." The doorbell rang, interrupting our conversation. Through the front window, I could see a familiar figure standing on my porch, not entirely unexpected, but still capable of making my stomach clench with old anxieties. Caleb stood there wearing a rumpled suit that had seen better days, holding a wrapped present and wearing the uncertain expression of someone who wasn't sure they'd be welcome. Behind him, I noticed a cab idling in the driveway. His license had been suspended after what his lawyer had diplomatically called a period of poor judgment and excessive drinking. "He's early," Arnold observed, his voice carefully neutral. "Supervised visit isn't supposed to start until 3. I know. I opened the door before Caleb could ring the bell again, not wanting the sound to alert Bella, who was upstairs getting dressed in her new birthday outfit. "You're 2 hours early." "I was hoping we could talk," Caleb said, his voice carrying the careful tone of someone who'd learned not to assume anything. "Before the party starts, before Bella comes down, there are things I need to say." Arnold appeared behind me, not threatening, but present, a reminder that I was no longer navigating these encounters alone. "Should I give you some privacy?" he asked. "No," I said immediately. "Whatever needs to be said can be said in front of you." Caleb's face tightened slightly at the exclusion, but he nodded with the resigned acceptance of someone who'd lost the right to demand private conversations. "I've been going to therapy," he said without preamble. "Dr. Martinez recommended someone after everything fell apart." The irony of getting mental health referrals from the same doctor who'd helped expose his affair wasn't lost on any of us, but I kept my expression neutral. "That's good, Caleb. How's it helping?" "I'm starting to understand what I lost," he said, his voice breaking slightly on the words. Not just you and Bella and the house and my career, I lost myself somewhere along the way, and I convinced myself that the answer was finding someone who would make me feel alive again instead of figuring out why I felt dead inside my own life. The admission hung between us like a confession, honest in a way Caleb hadn't been capable of during our marriage. Growth through destruction. Painful, but perhaps necessary. I'm glad you're getting help, I said sincerely. But if you're hoping this conversation leads to some kind of reconciliation, no, he interrupted quickly. No, I know that ship has sailed. I just needed you to know that I understand now. What I did, what it cost, why it was unforgivable. Understanding, finally. But understanding that had come too late to save anything.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.